In my mind, the best thing about these task force meetings is the quality of the panels, I should say, that we have. And this afternoon is no exception. So we're going to jump right in. Our first panel is really focused on what is it going to take building a workforce and infrastructure to implement the scale of projects that we need. And I'm really thankful that this panel and the next panel is going to be moderated by my colleague and friend, Ashley Conrad Seda. Ashley has deep experience in both the federal government and state government, and also serves on our Tahoe Regional Planning Agency as a governor's appointee. Over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, Wade. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Wade. Thanks to everyone who helped put today together. It has taken a lot of staff time from everyone at the casino, so we really appreciate that, and the lunch. Really just appreciate all of you being here. It's amazing to see such a packed room. So as Wade said, I serve on the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency board, where we balance the needs of two states, Nevada and California, in our quest to try to preserve and protect Lake Tahoe. It's a really wonderful opportunity, and we do all sorts of projects, from tree projects to water projects to housing projects. I also have had the great fortune of partnering with so many of you in the room through projects while I worked for the Bureau of Land Management with Liz, when I worked for Cal EPA, and we worked on a project that I'll talk about in just a second with Angie and others here. And now, since I have left full-time state service, with so many of you on projects putting work on the ground. So I was really honored to heed Patrick's call to moderate these two panels on sustaining and financing resilience. So this afternoon, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how we get this done, right? We heard in the morning these amazing projects and this long history in Tuolumne, and how all of the capacity building and time together has led to great projects. Now we're going to hear more about what it takes to continue this work and to spread it to other counties and other areas throughout California. We just had this amazing opportunity in Tuolumne with the Community and Watershed Resilience Program that we developed. I guess if there's a slide, Kristen, you can pull it up. We developed this program. We created this slide in 2015. So this was for the National Disaster Resilience Competition that you've heard about, where we brought $70.4 million to Tuolumne County. So way back then, we were talking, and even before then, right, as you heard this morning with Mike Albrecht and John Buckley, we were talking about the circular economy idea, and how do you put all the pieces of programs together with workforce, with people, with funding, with projects to sustain this type of work time and time again. And we had the tragedy of the Rim Fire to then launch us into an opportunity to create this program and sustain it. So it's going now, that's what we're hearing today, and we want to make sure that this type of work can happen everywhere, and that it's not just dependent on that singular funding source that comes in one time and then is used and recycled over and over again, but that we can grow this type of sustainable resilience economy, and that we can support people all over the state, and hopefully just replicate this in the West as well. So our first panel today on sustaining resilience has some really fantastic speakers, both from the area and working in the area. We'll start with James Hansen from the Central Sierra Economic Development District. Then we'll move on to Diana Beasley from the Tuolumne Band of Miwok Indians. Then we'll turn to Anakul Lakina from Burnbot. And finally, we'll hear from Colin Campbell from Heartwood Biomass. And all four of them will give you real concrete examples of what it takes to sustain resilience. And we really talked in planning for this panel about key takeaway messages so that everyone can walk out of this room ready to spread the work elsewhere throughout the state. So thanks for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you, James.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Hansen, and I am the Deputy Director for Motherlode Job Training, and we are also the implementer of the Central Sierra Economic Development District. And I want to start by saying that I have spent all of the years of my life living here in Tuolumne County, right? And as such, I have seen firsthand what wildfire can do to our region. I remember in my early 20s when the Rim Fire happened, just this sense of dread and just a sheer feeling of almost like an apocalyptic end to what it is that I felt like I knew. And up until that point, I'd never really paid attention to the media or followed a news story or tried to stay up to date so well on something until that event occurred. Shortly thereafter, I found myself working on a fuels crew where we were doing work out in the forest, and I was operating a chainsaw, and I was working to repair Forest Service roads. I was out in the burn scar of the Rim Fire, and I just remember this just sense of awe as to how something could be so devastating and have such an impact on our region. Fast forward to today, and now I get the opportunity to help lead an agency that is making a difference in the sphere of forestry and natural resources. So who is Motherlode Job Training? What is Central Sierra Economic Development District? Motherlode Job Training is the workforce development entity for the region. We serve Amador, Calaveras, Tuolumne, and Mariposa counties. Central Sierra Economic Development District is the EDA-recognized economic development district for the region. That serves our workforce development region and also includes the County of Alpine. Additional to that, we are a key partner in the Sierra Jobs First process, which then also adds the counties of Inyo and Mono counties. We are part of the workforce development system within the state of California. There are 45 workforce development boards in the state of California. Our system is then headed by the California Workforce Development Board that works with the Secretary of Labor to implement workforce development programs throughout the state. Earlier, we heard a great panel from Mike and Jason and Liz and John about how it is that we built resilience in our region, in Tuolumne County, how we catalyzed around a disaster to have true meaningful impact towards addressing issues on our landscape. But when we look at maintaining that resilience, sustaining it going forward, to have a resilient forest, you must have a resilient system, right? And addressing these challenges is not any one entity's to own. It is not any one person's job to solve in its entirety. It is not possible. And that is where we come into play in working with various partners to make sure that we have the workforce to address these issues. On my way in today, I was stopped because there was tree work being done for utility clearance. As I was coming down the highway, there's an overpass and it has some really beautiful artwork on it. And as I was going under that overpass, there's some trees. And coming up the hill was 2 logging trucks. Immediately thereafter, I look to my right and I see that there's tree service and they have all of their log yard right there. And I'm reminded that for as long as I can remember, and going back throughout history, our economy has been based on our natural resources and our forests. Going back to since 2020, we have invested around, through Motherlode Job Training, Central Sierra Economic Development District, around $2.2 million in workforce development funding. Some of that funding has been for biomass business development through the RCAC. The Greater Sierra Forestry Corps, where we were able to send 75 people to training to get skills in forestry and natural resources, partnering with agencies like Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board, CAL FIRE, Columbia College, the County of Tuolumne, Sierra Resource Management, Associated California Loggers, the American Logging Council, and many others. Expanding on that, we have partnered with the County of Tuolumne again with a CAL FIRE grant to do heavy equipment logging operator training. Additional to that, in working with Sierra Business Council, we are operating a next-gen sector partnership in land, energy, agriculture, and forestry to make sure that curriculum is industry aligned and that the training that people receive actually represents what industry needs to hire people. Additionally, we're also looking to how it is that we can stand up new business and working with LCI, CLEAR, Mariposa RCD, to bring new innovative biomass entities to the region. And what will that look like going forward? So I'd like to introduce, if folks have not heard about it already, Sierra Forest Works, which is a new and innovative pathway for students to go from high school to post-secondary education and into the workforce that involves industry partners, county, U.S. Forest Service, high schools, Motherlode Job Training, philanthropic agencies like Sonora Area Foundation, Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board, to identify a singular camp, or to identify multiple campuses so that we can train the next generation of forestry workers, preparing today's workforce for tomorrow's jobs. So as my time comes to a close to speak, I want to make it very clear that resilient forests start with resilient systems. Invite your local workforce board, invite your local economic development district to the table to be a part of the bigger discussions around the shared investment in the region. Build those partnerships, help develop a circular economy like we opened with, and then continue to align the investments. And then if you'd like to connect with us afterwards, please scan the QR code or reach out to us. Send me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to have further discussions with folks in the room. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Beasley. I serve as the Planning and Development Manager for the Tuolumne Band of Miwok Indians. The Tuolumne Band is a federally recognized tribe indigenous to this area. We currently have about 2,900 acres, which the tribe oversees, about 1,000 of which are in trust. The tribe operates their own fire department, the Tuolumne Rancheria Fire Department. You can see the fleet here, which has both an all-risk structure side, a 24/7 firehouse, and personnel, which can respond to any local emergencies, as well as a wildland side, which has a Type 2 initial attack hand crew, as well as 2 wildland engines, and new 2 full-time heavy fire equipment operators, as well as a Type 2 dozer, and all of those are deployed as national resources. In 2023, the tribe also developed the Tribal Conservation Corps, which was funded by the California Conservation Corps and serves as career training for Native youth, getting youth into pathways for natural resources. Through all of these programs, in any fuels reduction work, indigenous land management practices are taken into account. Of course, you've probably heard so much today about how, and everyone is aware, we do live in a fire-driven ecology, and once people did live in this area with fire and applied fire to the ground, and we did not see the overcrowding of forests that we see today. You can see on the bottom of this slide, this is from the 2019 bootleg fire. You can see where no treatment was applied. It's torched, Marscaped, and even where thinning was applied, you see a lot of loss of tall timber and old growth trees. And it's only where both thinning and prescribed fire were both utilized that we do not see a complete devastation to forest with a high intensity fire. Of course, to get there, to do thinning and prescribed fire on all of our acres takes a lot of humans. Humans do not suddenly appear because you have a job posting. So Tuolumne Band has to realize this, and this is something that rural counties suffer a lot with. It's hard to attract talent, and it's hard to retain talent. And so some things we've utilized in order to get these crews fully staffed are not only, looking at the human as a whole and taking a community approach based. So we built barracks so that we can have housing for hand crew members to come from out of the area. And then, looking at career trajectory. So it may not be hard to attract youthful talent and get an 18-year-old in here with no family to come work year-round. But once those people have families and they want to move up, we need to build opportunities not only for people to get training and do work that they're passionate about, but learn the terrain, learn the vegetation, and look at developing a crew and a workforce and a person as a whole. And so that's something that the tribe has taken seriously in building all of these crews and doing the work that we do. But of course, we could have all of the crews in the world, but no hand crews we all know the scale of work that needs to be done. We all know the number of acres that need to be treated in California alone. And without equipment, it's simply not going to happen. So adding the equipment division of the fire department is one step the Tuolumne Band has taken, employing at least 2 equipment operators year-round, but also developing training programs to have people knowledgeable about maintaining equipment, housing equipment, being deployed as a national resource, of course, but bringing that home and using that equipment on the ground to do meaningful work and treat meaningful acres. That's also collaborative, so we have partnerships with the Forest Service and the County of Tuolumne. We've done work for local utilities, and this is something that's very difficult to get funded, not only the high cost of purchasing equipment, but of keeping equipment in good order, retaining employees who can operate the equipment knowledgeably and service the equipment. These are all things where small agencies, rural tribes, suffer because those are very difficult to get funded. And so that's been a gap that we've overcome, but it's not been easy, and somewhere we still really need to do work and focus on how we fund projects. And then, of course, it's not only about developing a workforce and a community approach based to that, but of course, once the trees come down, once the work is done, we're left with large stacks of wood products that need to have a home. So the Tuolumne Band, we operate a firewood distribution program for tribal members and elders. It's also used in ceremony, and we try to keep the wood products and circular nature of that as close to home as possible, continuing to employ that community approached basis to the entire process, from hiring to how we distribute the wood and everything in between. Thank you.
First, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me and BurnBot. I'm the co-founder and CEO of BurnBot. Our mission at BurnBot is to really use technology to amplify workforce and get safe, ecological, effective, and affordable fuels work done on the ground. So a natural question is, why is a Silicon Valley tech company here in Tuolumne County? And the answer is just one word: YSS. I think YSS is a brilliant example of that old expression, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And when we studied this, we were blown away, deeply inspired by the remarkable collaboration that emerged from the rimfire. And we felt, when we saw this, we said, everything is here. The collaborations are here, the programs are here. What's missing is scaling the execution work, scaling the implementation work. And that honestly is why BurnBot exists. We exist to amplify the workforce so that good, safe, ecological, affordable fuels work can happen on the ground. So I'll tell you about how we think about technology and how we think about fuels work. We look at fuels treatment really as a system. And the system has 3 parts to it. The first part is intelligence, which is really using data, analytics, to map where should one do treatment, where are the right acres to do the treatment, and also what kind of treatment to be used. Sometimes beneficial fire is great, sometimes it's not. Sometimes mastication is the right solution, sometimes it's not. So it really does matter to bring the right treatment to the right acres. And if our crews have the intelligence on their phones to tell them what to do, you get really informed treatments on the ground as well. So that's step one. Step two is to actually use new technology and outfit existing technology so that you can bring the right treatment for the right acres, as I mentioned earlier. Sometimes it's using control burning machines, where our company gets its name from. Sometimes it's using aerial ignition drones. Sometimes it's using remote operated mastication systems that are a whole lot safer and can go on steep slopes. Sometimes it's using remote suppression systems that can do the same thing. And sometimes it's using data-driven forestry equipment that guide the operator and also collect really valuable data about what's going on the ground. And of course, these two things without having a regional workforce where you have in the community, by the community, for the community, that regional base is extremely critical. And that's the three-pronged kind of legs of the stool that make this magic happen. And we're really honored that we were awarded the Cyril G2Z program as the prime contractor because I think a lot of these things come together when, I believe at one point Mike said sometimes government gets in the way, but the G2Z program is actually a brilliant example of how large acre programs can happen. The reason it's a remarkable example is because there is one contractor who's responsible for the fully integrated outcome, from surveys to roads to mastication to timber to biomass removal, ultimately paving the landscape for receiving beneficial fire. So we're really honored that we get to be part of this. This integrated approach reduces delays, allows us to move really efficiently. And because this program is a multi-year program and a predictable program, it attracts investment. And it also builds local capacity. So to that effect, we're really proud that Bernbot Tuolumne is one of our largest regions. We have 50+ local jobs between Bernbot and our local partners. Through the course of this program, Bernbot will feed about $42 million in Tuolumne. The bulk of that will go to local capacities. So here's an example. When you have a predictable large-scale program, private capital comes in and puts money behind that. And the progress is evident. We've been doing this for now about 18 months. We've got, as you can see in the stats, we've already surveyed about 11,000 acres. Last year is when we started doing mastication. This year we'll triple our mastication goals as well. So once you have, there's nobody else to blame other than yourself. And if I'm held accountable to an outcome and a budget, I will execute with velocity and efficiency. Of course, none of this is possible if we don't have all the partners that you see listed over there, and we're really honored that we get to bring the community along with us. So I think we've talked a lot about how Tuolumne is a shining example for California. And there are some lessons here that I just want to underscore. We have talked about partnerships, and partnerships. So I won't spend more time on that. We have already talked about the need for investing in the local workforce so work can continue at the pace and scale that it has to happen. We've talked about what makes Tuolumne unique. There's a vibrant mill ecosystem over here. I think the one thing that I would like to kind of say is, restoration isn't a one-time investment. We have to protect the investments that have already been made, and maintenance treatments are a fraction of the cost of the initial work. So let's not forget that there's maintenance treatments also that have to happen. And once you have these predictable programs, you get verifiable outcomes that then lead to unlocking more private capital, whether it be from the recreation industry, the insurance industry, the wood product industry. So I think I'll just end by saying, by quoting William Gibson, and the quote goes something like this: "The future is already here. It's just not perfectly distributed. It's just unevenly distributed." And I just want to celebrate the G2Z program and the work that YSS kind of catalyzed in Tuolumne County. We are getting, if you harden the homes, do the DSI, and do the landscape treatments, I think remarkable outcomes are here to stay. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So as was said at the beginning, my name is Colin Campbell, and I'm the CEO of Heartwood Biomass, and I'll just add that this is my first task force meeting, and I'm very happy to be here with you all today. So in my very brief presentation, there are 3 things that I hope you leave with today, and that is need, partnership, and change. And before going too deep into each one of those, I'll just tell you a bit about Heartwood is to kind of who Heartwood is to set the stage. And it's interesting because I think of forest products manufacturing as someone who produces lumber or fencing or panels, and Heartwood is not that. Its end products are very much designed to meet the needs of the forest. And the best example to show that is our 2 primary products. So one of them, located on the top of that slide, are post and poles. Post and poles are small, 4, 5, 6-inch round poles that are typically used in agricultural settings. And the material that feeds into those poles from the woods is historically the type of tree that we would either see masticated, so the fuel is transformed but left in the woods, not necessarily removed, or put into burn piles where it's then burned, all of that carbon released. And so we've designed our product line to be able to get better usage of that material. Our second product, and actually our core product, is kiln-dried bundled firewood. And this is what you would see walking out of a gas station or a grocery store. You got 5 to 7 pieces of firewood wrapped up, and you grab it to take home to burn in the backyard, or if you're going camping for the weekend, in a designated fire pit to burn. But again, this is material that conventional sawmills don't typically want because we prefer a slightly larger log, a species that there's an overabundance of throughout the West, and is typically drier. And an example of that is we're working with one of our partners right now to source logs that are from a 4.5 or 5-year-old fire. The type of material that would have just been left in the woods or treated through burning in the past, and we're able to find a higher and better use for it. So that's the difference with Heartwood compared to conventional forest products manufacturing. And the last point here is just Heartwood has 2 facilities. Its original facility, and that has been in operation for a number of years, is located in Northeast Oregon, Wallowa County. And the reason I'm here today is our newer facility, which became operational in late 2024 and through 2025, located just 5 minutes down the road. And so how we got here plays into those 3 points. And again, those were need, partnership, and change. And need, this is really just a recognition of the county of Tuolumne for recognizing that they had a very specific need. We all understand that we're trying to prevent catastrophic unnatural wildfires from happening. At a broad level, that makes sense. What it means within a particular region, may change. And they recognized that they needed a specific manufacturer who could take that smaller diameter log from the woods or this older burn material and turn it into a higher value product, and then also create some economic resilience in the community as well. And so they recognized that, found Heartwood, got us to see the synergies and the opportunity in Tuolumne County, and then the need turned to Heartwood to try to get that capital to actually move down into Tuolumne and invest in this other facility. And need turned into partnership through Heartwood's own private investors in supporting the work we're doing, but really importantly through the Biomass Utilization Fund, we're able to get the capital that we needed to build the facility that many of you will be seeing tomorrow. And then through other grant programs, through the Forest Service and CAL FIRE, we're able to build that facility, continue to invest in it to get up to capacity, and see that very much as a necessity going forward to maximize our biomass utilization at Heartwood here in Tuolumne. And if I included all of the partners on that slide, you probably wouldn't be able to see any logos, and so these are very specific, but I just want to acknowledge that we work with a variety of people in the region, and sitting right next to me at BurnBot, we'll be sourcing logs from them this year. So partnership happens at many different levels, but I feel we've talked in depth about that today. The last point here is change. And so we created a change in Tuolumne where there wasn't a Heartwood facility, and now there is, so it's successful. But between creating the facility, there's still a lot that has to happen back to the woods to actually get that material out of the woods and to Heartwood. And we've been both successful in directly receiving some assistance grants to move those materials from the woods to our facility indirectly through some of our other log supplying partners. We very much have been reliant on those grants to date. They're going to be critical to our success in 2026, 2027, and we still see them as a need going into the future, but we are trying to use those funds in the most strategic way possible. What I mean through that is some more of this change that happens in the woods is getting out of the mentality of cutting a log and throwing it into a burn pile, right? It's grabbing that log and actually setting it on the landing to get shipped to a facility. And so those funds help us bring about that change, to help subsidize that, to show the value to some of our contract partners. And it also helps to get the right capacity in our area to not only log that material, harvest it, but then also transport it. Because the very unique thing about Tuolumne County is we don't have short logger trucks, which are needed to move those small length logs to our facility. And using some of these funds, we'll see them on the highway this summer. And then the last thing I'll just say, and we've been successful with this, our land manager partners is actually writing these prescriptions into these forest projects to target that material for removal. And so we hope to continue to work with those partners into the future and keep using more biomass at our facility. And with that, I'll just say if you would like to get involved with Heartwood in any way, understand more, please reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Those were all really great presentations. You know, what you all are talking about is, first of all, dozens of partners have been with you along the way, lots of funding opportunities. To get this all done, though, you do need a lot of outreach and education. You need people to know about what you're doing and then to respond to the call. How have, in Tuolumne County, what has the response been like from people who coming in for job training or workforce development? And for you two, how have you been able to get the word out of what you're doing in Tuolumne to expand your business elsewhere?
Yeah, I would say from the perspective of workforce development and getting the word out to people who are looking for the careers, right? When we first did the very first cohort of the Greater Sierra Forestry Corps here in Tuolumne County, we needed to use social media. We needed to use our community partners, Health and Human Services, folks who had people who were unemployed or people who were maybe just getting out of high school, and we needed to connect with those, our local high schools, right? But once the first cohort took form here in Tuolumne County, they then told their brother who told their other person, and then once there was a graduation, there was a lot more momentum to it. And so from the workforce board perspective, it's taking those folks and then pairing them with the employers who are hiring, right? And so when we look at the folks who are here on this panel, everyone on the panel has hired graduates from programming that we have done through Columbia College in partnership with Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board and through our programs. A lot of times we have workers who are sitting there ready and willing to work. They just need to know that the jobs are out there, and they also need sometimes someone to break down the barrier to their entry. Maybe they don't have the right skill, maybe they don't have the childcare, maybe they don't have the right clothing, tools, etc. And we work to break down those barriers so that they can be successful at employers who are at this table.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I will really just echo what James said. I think the major thing is not that people don't see the job posting, but that people need to be able to afford to take the job. So, you know, if they're looking at moving here, housing is a struggle. But in addition, you know, there's a certain number of jobs, and I think this is changing for the better. But historically, in this industry, you know, you need a certain number of qualifications, and you sometimes have to take a job at a cost to be able to reach that level of classification to get hired. So taking a holistic approach and looking at what it takes to bring someone here to live here, or to hire someone who already lives here, and create a career for them, and not just create, a job where they work 6 months and get laid off, that is critically important. We're never going to retain people in this region or bring people to this region, and we are already at a detriment for that. We are already at a very low population base and have a very small pool of people from which to draw. So we cannot sustain wildfire resiliency without drawing people in and retaining the talent base we have. And so, creating opportunities that are more than a job and a rate and hopefully benefits is critically important to be able to sustain a workforce that's going to get the job done.
Yeah, I'll just build on what you said over there. And maybe at the risk of sounding like a broken record, when you have large-scale predictable programs that give certainty to have a all-year kind of workforce as well. So that gives certainty. Tuolumne is a beautiful place to come to. So it's actually pretty easy to attract people to come here if you can show them that, hey, you're going to be 365 days, you're going to be here for a multi-year program. And then secondarily, there's a new generation of folks that you can attract who grew up on an iPad when you can show them remote operated systems and show them interesting technology. So when you put all those three things together, and if you hire locally, people can go back home. They don't have to kind of paratroop in and paratroop out. They can go back home safe, be with their families. So these are the ingredients, but it all starts with having a predictable long-term program. Absent that, if you're doing 50 acres here, 20 acres here, episodic fields work is really difficult to build that kind of sustained capacity.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I would agree, consistency is key with keeping any workforce. I think we understand that, but we also need our partners to be consistent too, to keep that supply coming into us from the manufacturing facility. But beyond that, I should note too, I'm somewhat new into my role for a few months here, but from what I've learned, our partnerships with the Workforce Training Program and others has been really key for us to bring people into our facility that didn't necessarily have the skills to just walk in. And so utilizing these resources that the county and the state has put out there for private businesses to use has been really key to our success.
Thank you. And I'll just ask one more question before I turn it over to Patrick and the committee. But with this committee here today, you've got a captive audience. You all did a great job of coming up with your key messages. What can the committee do for you in their roles to ensure that predictability and consistency, and to help seed the right amount of staffing, funding, opportunities with the organizations you're running? What might you ask of them today, or what do you want them to take back to their staff and to their budget plans? I didn't prep you for this, so apologies.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that from our perspective here in Tuolumne County, from my perspective on the local level, right, is that it's a lot easier to pull a rope when someone's pushing it, right? And so with that in mind, we here have a grassroots bottom-up approach, but when that matches with a top-down approach from the state level, that's when we can really accelerate that momentum, right? And so from my earlier speech, when I was talking about how resilient forests start with resilient systems, that is what I mean, a local and state system that is aligned. And so I would encourage to bring in the California Workforce Development Board to allocate funding specifically for training and infrastructure improvements, and also have that include things like equipment or the ancillary support services that will eliminate barriers to workforce participation.
Great. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. And I'll maybe speak for you a little bit here, and consistent log supply is critical for us. so I think programs like CERL, and some of these continued transportation subsidies are very important in the very near term to us. And just some of these continued programs around assistance and funding to invest in our infrastructure to maximize the amount of biomass utilization we have at our manufacturing facilities is hugely helpful.
I mean, so many of you in the audience are doing this work, and so I really encourage you all after this to find each other and start building more of these projects elsewhere throughout the state, right? We see all of the logos on the screen, and as each of you were talking, I was like, oh, they need to connect to this person and that person. There's so many connections still to be made to continue spreading elsewhere. Patrick, I'll turn it over to you now for more questions.
So at Bernbot and Heartwood, you both talked about the need for a predictable supply. What makes you so sure the supply is going to be predictable here? I mean, are there 10-year or 20-year contracts in place as the Forest Service is trying to move to? Is it simply because there's a collaborative in place that you believe in? Why are you and your investors so confident that the wood's going to be there?
Well, I think one just needs to look at the number of acres that still need to be treated as a starting point. And then the ones that we have treated, we have to go get that haircut again. So when we look at it from that perspective, from an addressable market, to use an investor buzzword, we see that there's a market here. Secondarily, if the G2Z program was not here, we would have had a very different approach to it. The G2Z program is truly transformative, and I can't underscore that enough. And I believe there's more of these coming. So that gives us hope that this is a sustainable model.
This conference, right? It's clearly a priority for the state, for our federal government, for all of the local agencies. And to echo the last point of projects like the GZ, that we're continuing to see improvement over time and streamlining of these processes to get these fuels reduced in our forests.
I had a follow-up question on the transportation subsidy. Obviously, that's going to be tough to sustain given the budget climate. We've gotten a lot of feedback, we even put it in our draft plan, that the agency should strongly consider building in transportation costs into every project, recognizing there's a trade-off there. You get, arguably, your project per acre cost goes up, but in the long run, you get industry growing, which means you can get more done. Is that something that you guys think would be helpful?
100%.
First of all, fantastic presentation. It's very, very informative. But I want to expand a little bit on what Patrick was asking, and this goes to James, Anukul, or Colin, and maybe Diana as well. Based on what you know in terms of biomass business, so what proportion of currently available biomass is being utilized in terms of the business? And related to that, what are the key, I think you talked about some of them, what are the key obstacles to scaling that up? And then a second part to that is, if utilizing more of that is could be achieved, is that something that could sort of fill the gap to the funding challenges that Diana, you were talking about, whether it's for the equipment or hiring, but basically just understanding in the current context, what proportion of it, any one of you can answer, is being currently utilized?
I can take a first stab. The program that Bernbot's currently working on, which is a Cyril G2Z program, the estimated output from that is about 20 million board feet and about 385,000 tons of biomass. I have to be honest and say that the treatment capacity, our ability to treat today, sure, it's limited by the usual machines and crews, but that capital can solve that. But if there is no offtake for that, then we are fundamentally bottlenecked by the ability to supply that. So, and Tuolumne is fortunate that it has a vibrant mill ecosystem, but maybe I'll put you on the spot, Colin. If I gave you 400,000 tons of biomass this year, you may not be able to take all of it. So then we've got two options. Option one is we get more investment in Heartwood and more mills. Option two is maybe the G to Z should have a Z plus that says burn it. Those are the two options. So short of that, I don't see a path. And once again, I will qualify my remarks by saying Tuolumne is fortunate. The rest of California does not have that, and the problem is more acute. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but those are my initial remarks on that.
One more question. So if that was all to be done, is that something that could offset some of the funding challenges that you have?
I wouldn't say that it would necessarily offset. I think in some ways it's possible to design something where, where the utilization of the wood product does offset those costs. But I think without a rather complex framework to get there, it actually kind of creates the new problem because of the transportation costs and because, say you have somewhere to take this wood product, you're getting farther and farther and farther and farther away from that centralized location with every passing year and every acre that's treated. Because maintenance of those already treated acres is not going to be bringing in the quality wood product that they'd like to see at these centralized hubs. And so in some ways, you're actually creating a bit of a new funding gap where getting the acres treated is one problem, and then getting rid of the wood product is an entirely separate problem that needs to be addressed holistically. We need to address both of those problems together, but I don't know that just with the ever-increasing costs of transportation of that wood product to a centralized location, I don't know that it's necessarily going to offset the cost of treating those acres in the first place without a really, really creative solution to get there.
Got it.
So I wanted to circle back on something, Diana, that you said. You said humans don't necessarily appear just because you post a job listing, which I think is great, a great point. And I wanted to give a shout out to Chief Schultz when he was here in California talking about the need to do job fairs in the communities that are near the national forests where we're looking to get employees. So that seems like one good strategy. But I guess my question is for you, James, seeing that slide with all the partners, you have the school system there. So can you talk a little bit about how that kind of collaborative can reach out to students and youth who are in the community and looking for how to build a future in the community? Because I think, in rural counties and counties across the state, that's a big question for young people is how could I stay here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that when we're at an economic development table, you'll hear a lot about. You'll hear about brain drain, right? People leave here to get a 4-year degree. They see opportunity elsewhere. They leave, they get the job there, they don't come back, right? And how are we gonna get it so that our local students can see opportunity here, right? Going back to the question earlier where it was asked, do we feel we're utilizing all of the biomass? The answer is no. I drive down the highway and I can still see logs that are piled ready to burn. And so when we look at the high school and we look at our students and then we look at the adult learner pipelines as well, if you can see it, you can dream it, you can be it, right? And the way that you get there is through work-based learning opportunities, bringing in the employers so that they can see themselves in that role. I feel that an agency up here, it was brought up earlier, the Tuolumne County Alliance for Resources and Environment, 2CARE, does a great job of starting that even before someone hits high school. I didn't know what a feller buncher looked like until I went on a field trip in 3rd grade to a logging sale and saw what a feller buncher could do, right? And so then from an early age, you can see I can be that, right? When we look at Sierra Forest Works and having it start with the Sonora High School and starting at Wildcat Ranch and then bringing you into post-secondary education, looking at state level plans like the Master Plan for Career Education, right? And making it more skills-based as opposed to academic-based, that excites students. And so I think that that is how Sierra Forest Works is going to be very successful going forward, and how it'll help sustain resilience for all of the employers at this table. And that's where folks like BurnBot with maybe a more nascent technology, or folks like Kodama Systems where they're maybe utilizing remote controlled AI heavy equipment from somewhere that's not even at the logging sale, is gonna change the workforce. And we as a workforce board need to be ready to take that and to develop those or address those skills gaps, right?
Add one thing to that because I feel like I have maybe a personal perspective on this too. So I grew up in Tuolumne County. I turned 18 and I left, right? And I went and got a 4-year degree and I got a job in another part of the state. And then over that time, we continued to see investment in Tuolumne County until this opportunity came up and I came back. It's easy to move to an area that doesn't seem like it's dying, right? Where there's investment from the state and private industry.
I feel like we, in the state of California, have tried different ways to attract private investment in the wood products market. And I see Heartwood and it makes me so happy. And I wanna clone your company and attract, more of your companies to different parts of California. But I feel like sometimes in government, we're not the best ones to really understand what are the investments, what are the conditions that companies like yours need to make the decision that you made to come to California. So what would you say to a bunch of well-intentioned government leaders that want to build up the wood products market, but frankly, over the last few years haven't been, I'll be honest, all that successful attracting many more companies like yours?
Definitely. I think there's a few different paths I can go down there. I'll give you a couple different perspectives, and I think Heartwood's perspective here is unique in that it was a company from Oregon coming to California. And I think there were a lot of hard lessons learned there, and that might resonate with other operators from outside of the state that are just scared about the regulatory environment. And I think one of the lessons in talking to my team, because I obviously wasn't a part of expanding here, was that there probably should have been a lot more interaction with organizations like GoBiz from the beginning to help with that. So that's maybe one takeaway. A second takeaway is I had mentioned in my presentation that we were beneficiaries of the Biomass Utilization Fund. And having the state or agencies put up that much support to say they want you here makes it a lot easier to come in. And there's obviously other things to consider with markets, and sometimes it takes time to build up that capacity. But when someone's pulling you in and they're coming up with mechanisms for loans to help support that growth, it makes it a lot easier to expand. And we think there's opportunities in the future throughout the West and the interior West, but we're very happy to be here today.
That's really helpful. And just a quick follow-up question. To what extent do you think we can be helpful in building markets for these different products, whether it's cross-laminated timber, mass timber, some of the niche kind of products you're developing?
Yeah, and we're very specific in our low-value products. I do have some opinions on those, but there is just one thing about the state of California sort of incentivizing using wood products made in California. So one of the things we do is we produce kiln-dried firewood. Most of the firewood is coming from Utah or out-of-state suppliers, and so we're trying to compete from other environments that have lower cost of labor, lower environmental regulations, and so that limits our opportunity to expand the market. So looking at opportunities like that to promote California-based products, I think would be hugely helpful, and that also applies to mass timber because California is obviously a huge construction market, and you're seeing some of that investment up in Redding and other areas from some of these mass timber companies. But incentivizing the use of California materials would be huge.
Got it. It's helpful.
Yep.
So I'd be remiss if you guys didn't take advantage of the fact that you have the regional forester here. Do each of you we've heard a lot about success stories, but there's also, I imagine, some barriers. So if there's one message you could send to the Forest Service, what would it be?
More G2Zs, more IRSCs.
You're like my favorite person of the day because I love G2Z, so I'm good with that one. All right.
So the IRSC is a service contract, which is different than an IRTC, where the expectation is fields work will be funded out of timber sales, which, while sound as an idea, will not fund the entire fields work. So the S in that IRSC is a really important consideration. The G to Z, or you can call it A to Z, or K to M, whatever the letters you want to use, but the idea of having an integrated program where there's one person who's accountable to an outcome of getting work done. So when I say integrated, what I mean is surveys, roads, mastication, timber, biomass, beneficial fire, that's a key piece. And Secretary, while you did not direct the question to me, I want to take this moment to also say one thing, if I may be shameless and have an ask. One thing that would be really great, not just for the wood product industry, but also for contractors to build regional capacity, going back to the predictable piece, is when we award solicitations for fields programs, why don't we also include maintenance in there?
Yes.
Because if you did, because if I may, if you did do that, and as a contractor, I am raising my hand up and saying, I will guarantee, I will assure that that risk does not change. And you know what? If I'm on the hook for 10 years, I'm going to do a really good job the first time around.
I don't want to let you off the hook for asking something of our regional forester, but I want to put Joe on the spot, for example, or if we had Angie Avery about, what would it mean to fund maintenance? Presumably that would make the contracts larger. We do less initial work because the contracts would be larger for the maintenance. But maybe just answer that in a moment, but then also want to keep the suggestions for our regional forester coming.
Good.
There we go. Good point. And as we go out and we look at great fuels work that is occurring on the ground, and then we go out the next year or 2 years later, we realize that if we are not doing maintenance, it is causing a losing battle and wasted funds. And so we really have to focus on that maintenance aspect as well. Now, to your point, so many of these funds that we grant or contract out in multi-year funding cycles is not sustainable, guaranteed long-term funding. And so as an organization, we have to look at what is the sustainability of the funding we're giving you and the time period in which that needs to occur. I would love to give you a 10-year contract. I would love to give, not necessarily you, although I love your great work, but any supplier a 10-year contract to maintain and guarantee the maintenance of these projects. But it really has to come down, and that's what we all work together for, is to be able to ensure that we can figure out a path forward for sustainable long-term funding.
And I have to add that the maintenance thing is so important. We're having a lot of discussion around, we're doing these huge fuel breaks. That's a heck of a lot of money we're investing. And we are really throwing it away if we do not plan on the maintenance. And so I think we owe that to the folks who live in California, who work or live across the West, to the public. We have to really make the most of that initial investment. So the maintenance is a must.
And just knowing that those guidelines are open for feedback for a couple more weeks we saw earlier, I do think that would be a very useful comment to put in, and maybe even estimating for all of you what you estimate the percentage of the overall cost would be to do maintenance funding. I mean, as we see, we separately fund capacity building, planning, implementation, and then we stop. We don't actually fund maintenance or monitoring. And so what would it take, soup to nuts, to fund it all, and what would that percentage be? So we saw those screen grabs for putting in comments, and if you all agree with where this direction is going, please submit those comments too. Anyone else want to contribute?
If I could just break in on that, I do think that's one of the reasons why CAL FIRE and DOC are moving towards block grants. Because when you're funding one-off projects, you're not going to fund maintenance, you're not going to fund monitoring. But if we move towards these integrated regional plans, like the ones we have here, that have bundles of projects for 5 and 10 years, you can build into your grant application maintenance, monitoring, assessment, performance, and you get a lot more done. You can send a message to the workforce that it's not a one-off project. You're going to have 5 to 10 years of work, so you're going to hire full-time people instead of part-time people. And you send a message to industry that you're going to have a 5 to 10 year. I know it's not 20, but at least it's 10 years of certainty of work. So I do hope where CAL FIRE is going and DOC is going towards these landscape block grants that we talked about is going to at least help with this problem. Now, having said that, as CAL FIRE reminds us, that only, and Sierra Nevada Conservancy reminds us, that only works if the entities have the capacity to spend that kind of money. And there's a lot of concern among the agencies that giving that money to an RCD that has 4 employees isn't going to cut it. So that's really where the county comes in and sophisticated regional agencies who are used to handling tens of billions of dollars like Tuolumne is. So hopefully that'll be part of the answer as we move ahead, moving towards regional plans that are funded by block grants. It won't happen overnight, but we're hoping that over time we can get there.
Yeah. Any other comments for our regional forester?
I will add one. And so when we look at our local landscape for our businesses, 93% of our businesses have 7 or fewer employees. And so before I was the deputy director, I did business services, and many times I would be working with a business and they're trying to figure out how it is they can expand their business, and they juggle between working for their business or working on their business. And so I would say we've talked about, streamlining processes to do more projects, things like that, but also streamlining and educating our smaller business community how it is that they can bid on these contracts, how it is they can respond to an RFP or an RFQ, so that then they can also take part and help accelerate some of the work that's been being done.
Maybe just a quick follow-on the workforce front. Do you need anything from the state to have a better sense, like projection-wise, of jobs and workforce demand? Or do you feel like it's actually working well through the workforce development boards and the labor agency? Because I just think about, we go all over the state, and all these regional entities, these regional groups and leaders are prioritizing a lot of work across the state. So I love the model that you're building here. Just want to make sure we're doing what we can to support you and really give you a sense of what type of, how many jobs and what's the sustainability of those jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say from the state, really, for us, it's 2 things. And the first thing is that I just really want to thank everyone from the state, from the feds, for being here. Because we can give you a PowerPoint, we can show you a video of our region, but until you see it, until you witness it, you don't know what it really looks like, right? From the state level, right, I would also say that it would be great to help elevate our rural voice. When I look at the state economic blueprint, the only way that our regional area had an identity in that blueprint was around the circular bioeconomy. And they weren't really focusing on timber or innovative wood products. It was also more around ag, right? And I understand that on the state level, investment's gonna follow what's going to be the most attractive and what is going to be the most profitable. But to help elevate that rural voice, that we do have a tradable economy here, folks like Hartwood, prove that point. That would be very helpful on the state level.
Are there any more executive committee comments? We've got our county reps here. How are you going to take this and run with it in other counties too?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment and suggestion, and I've talked about this in the past, but when we look at problems that we have within the county and how we adapt and conquer those challenges in partnership with the state, I look at roads as actually a good example. And people might say, roads, why are we talking about roads? But here in the state of California, we have something that's called self-help counties. Basically, it means if a county is willing to tax themselves in order to manage roads, they're going to be eligible to a special pool of funding. And so we talk a lot about federal funding, we talk a lot about state funding, but very rarely are we talking about local funding. And I think that is a missing element to the piece of the pie. And I think if the state can work to incentivize counties to participate in that manner, we might solve that maintenance issue, right? So I think there is, again, just to underscore that there is an opportunity out there to further engage with counties at this level. So again, just a suggestion. Doesn't make me the most popular guy in the room talking about additional taxation, but I think if we can, really tie that nexus to risk reduction and long-term benefits therein, I think we have a case to make that argument. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Bobby. I think you said that very well. I wanted to follow up on two things. Patrick, you were making the point that in this kind of conundrum about building out long-term funding and consistency there, I think counties are a good partner because we are here for the long term. And again, we touch things on so many fronts, whether it's emergency services or, workforce development too. I wanted to kind of offer, James, I think one of the things that you were mentioning about you have local businesses who could use a little help getting directed to the right opportunity. And in the healthcare space in county land, we talk about, no wrong door when someone comes in looking for services. And if there's a way that we could, in this grant-making space, make sure that there's fewer wrong doors, for people to come and know the right places to go. And if they show up at not the right place, we can help redirect too. So maybe there's a way that we can focus what the opportunities are to one clear space too.
Well, thank you all. We've heard lots of great words that we can, we have one more. Sorry, Don, go ahead.
No worries. So I have a question for Diana. I'm thinking about long-term sustainability for Tuolumne Band and the programs you've talked about, particularly thinking about the fire department and the CCC, or Tribal Conservation Corps. What does the long-term sustainability look like there for like tribal youth engagement coming up? I'm kind of curious about that. And then the other thing that's on my mind is thinking about Tuolumne Band's lands are surrounded in part by Bureau of Land Management and then also ancestral lands on the Forest Service. Like, what are the partnerships and potential barriers that are there that you think need to be addressed? So those two things are on my mind. Thanks.
So to address your first question, the sustainability of the Conservation Corps, luckily now we have several more cohorts funded for that Conservation Corps. So just looking to build on that and continue to secure funding to keep that program going and grow it. That includes things like housing, which, as I mentioned before, is an ongoing issue because, of course, to grow that program, we need more youth. That's not something you can manufacture quickly. And so bringing in youth from area tribes and other indigenous people who may not be registered with a tribe will continue to grow that program. And that directly feeds into growing things like the hand crew or other opportunities to work in natural resources, both for the tribe and in the region. And hopefully they become inspired by this area and want to stay here and work. So that's really key. So that sort of ties into the maintenance idea. We're not just maintaining acres treated, but we're maintaining workforce that we build. So, if you get funding for 3 years of a program, that funding is going to run out, and you need to make sure that you're building on your success and continuing to secure funding and people to run the program as well. So that's really critical and something that we have a long-term vision for. To your second question, can you repeat your second question? I got so involved in that one.
Mostly what I'm looking at is your relationship with federal partners, BLM and U.S. Forest Service, and kind of needs their relationships that you have there.
Right, so we're lucky to have an agreement with, we're a part of the master stewardship agreement with the county. And so in turn, the tribe does do regional work here with the Forest Service, deploys engines, the hand crew, and the Conservation Corps to do work there. But we're also lucky that there's programs like the Bureau of Indian Affairs has an ancestral land program, so they will fund work that's adjacent to tribal lands, so we can continue those fuel breaks on areas that are adjacent to lands that the tribe manages and that the Forest Service may not have prioritized simply for, access or, other reasons, and work in tandem with the Forest Service to treat those acres. So that's really lucky. We have excellent relationships with BLM, with Forest Service, with BIA, and that really allows a lot of opportunities for meaningful work here, and to continue to expand that circle of treatment and fuels reduction work and tie into things that the Forest Service may have already done on the ground. So.
Okay, any last comments or questions? Well, really, thank you to our panelists for the work that you're doing and for sharing it all with us today and for giving us all our marching orders to continue to spread this work throughout the state. So thank you so much. You have a 15-minute break. Oh, go ahead, Wade.
So before we go to break, I just wanted to share a thought, which is, and acknowledge the folks who have done the work that have brought us here today. I had a chance to visit over the break with former Cal Fire Chief Tom Porter. I'm going to embarrass you, Tom, and ask you to stand up, who was Chief Tyler's predecessor. And Chief Porter was saying, boy, how far we've come since those early task force meetings a handful of years ago. And I want to go back even further and credit actually county supervisors from this part of the state for really pushing on the creation of the first version of this, which was the tree mortality task force during the drought of 2012 to 2015 when it was Chief Ken Pimlott. And it was supervisors like Randy Hanfeld in Tuolumne County who were really loud voices that there needed to be a stronger state response. So fast forward, we really stand on the shoulders of so many leaders who have brought us here today. With that said, we're going to take about a 15-minute break, and we're going to start back here promptly at 3 p.m. Thank you.